You were born in the wrong place, at the wrong time, with the most dangerous flaw of all, a soft heart. In the Middle Ages, being romantic was as useful as a leaky boat in a rough sea, a beautiful sight to watch sink. While everyone else was trading promises for property, rings for goats, you wanted poetry in the moonlight. And that, my friend, was asking for suffering. Imagine yourself hiding behind a damp stone wall, holding a flower stolen from the feudal lord's garden. The sweet perfume clashes with the smell of sweat and straw that permeates your clothes. Your eyes search for the maiden's window. Every second out there is an invitation to death, or to lose a few teeth at the very least. Because love back then wasn't about intertwined hearts. It was about intertwined fiefdoms. His sweet Katerina didn't choose anything. She was chosen. And if her father decided that a plot of land or half a dozen cows were more valuable than her passionate sighs, goodbye romance, hello marriage contract. You could even attempt the impossible, a poem, a serenade whispered by the wall. But all the older brother had to do was hear the tinkle of his lyre for the next song to be the sound of his skull cracking against the stones. At court, being a troubadour was the only way to survive with that soft heart, but even that came at a price. You sang for the nobles, and they laughed, they were enchanted, they spilled wine. But when the troubadour began to charm the wrong wife, the court jester became a living joke, and his neck a decorative item on a lamppost in the square. At night, the taverns were abuzz with rumors. There you saw others like yourself, bankrupt poets, drunken dreamers, young men who sold their souls for a stolen kiss behind the barn. Some left with a promise of love, most left with their cheeks scarred by an angry husband. If by some miracle their love were reciprocated, their luck wouldn't last. The priest didn't celebrate vows of passion without feudal consent. Elopement? Only in ballads that ended in tragedy. Medieval Romeo and Juliet were ordinary peasants, buried far away, without a tombstone, without a verse. The cold was constant, so was the fear. Every step in the mud, every rustle of skirts behind the corral, every hastily written love letter was proof that you didn't belong in that world of iron and debt. You weren't a warrior, you weren't a feudal lord, you weren't even useful. The only weapon in your hands was your word, and your word on that hard ground was worth less than a horse's shoe. Perhaps that was what made it all the more cruel, knowing that words protected you from nothing. While the baron slept beside his fiancée, you dreamed alone, embraced by the smell of damp straw, wishing the cows were less valuable than your beating heart. The next morning, you woke to the rooster's crow, and your boots were covered in mud. Her father was negotiating with the neighbor. 7 cows, 2 goats, a patch of fertile land, and your poem was just a smear of ink hidden under his shirt. Still, you tried. Another stolen flower, another hidden note, another promise whispered between the fence posts. A quick kiss exchanged before the guard dogs noticed. But in the Middle Ages, nothing escaped notice. The gossipy servant, the curious sister, the envious peasant. Soon your secret love became a tavern story, and you the protagonist of a joke that ended in punches. Some ran far away, fled into the forest, became wandering bards, but the forest had wolves, and the feudal lord had hunting dogs. Those who didn't die of hunger died of fear. The lucky ones became legends. They said certain poems crossed borders, passed from mouth to mouth, but the writers rarely lived to see their verse gain fame. In the Middle Ages, there were no happy endings for romantics. Love was a currency, and you didn't get the right change. The price was paid in broken bones, torn promises, and forced silences. But even so, by the well, in the shadow of the wall, you found yourself wondering, what if, by some miraculous leap, I love you was stronger than counting cows? The answer? It never came. Winter came. The arranged marriage came. The torn letter came, thrown into the fire. You came, aged, singing in exchange for a mug of beer, remembering her face. Because deep down, love survives. Romance doesn't. You were the weak link, a mistake of the times, a hope that bled with each new dowry announced at the fair. And if there was any consolation left, it was knowing that centuries later, someone would still tell his story. They would laugh at his misfortune, and secretly, they would envy his epic stupidity in believing that, in the end, an I love you would be worth more than 7 fat cows.
Ultimately, the village slept peacefully while you, awake, peered at the moon through the cracks in the thatched roof. Each sigh was a cold blade piercing your ribs. Love there wasn't a sword, it was a dagger turned inward. You remembered her at the well, laughing as she hauled the heavy bucket, her delicate hands grimy with earth. A smile, a furtive glance, crumbs that fed your hunger for poetry. A kiss left unsaid was worth more than any war won by knights in shining armor. Every now and then, courage burned within. You swore to escape, to scrape together a few coins, steal an old wagon, and leave before the rooster crowed. But courage, like everything in the Middle Ages, quickly decayed. All it took was a clap of thunder, a dog barking in the yard, or her father's suspicious look for the dream to dissolve into the mud. So, there was the tavern, the hard bench, the cracked mug, the off-key music. There you'd find other fools, each with a similar story, an impossible love, a broken promise, a slap on the back barn door. If you were smart, you'd surrender. You'd wipe the ink from your poems, learn to trade goats, measure your land. You'd become a man of means, a suitable husband. But being romantic was being stupid. And stupid people don't become landowners. They become stories poorly told by the campfire. Between laughs, someone would ask, "Was it worth it?" You shrugged. Maybe it was. Because for a moment, between the brush of fingers and the hidden sigh, you were king of a kingdom all your own. Outside, the logs crackled. The icy wind carried the smell of hay, dung, and wet campfires. Real life, hard and relentless, pushed you back onto the road. And the road held no happy endings for dreamers. Some, more daring, tried their luck with older women, wealthy widows thirsty for companionship. But even there, love wasn't love. It was a bargain. It was a cold bed bought with lukewarm whispers. And in the end, loneliness was always left. In spring, flowers bloomed in the fields. You stole one, hid another inside your hat. You thought of her, already sleeping beside the husband chosen by cows. Meanwhile, her father smiled, owner of a new tract of land. At every fair, at every wedding announcement, the message was the same. Verses don't plow the land. Poems don't feed goats. Kisses don't support walls. But still, the heart insisted on bleeding. And when the harvest came, there were parties, wine, dancing, exchanging promises. You, leaning against a tree, strummed a worn lyre, stealing glances from distracted young women. Some laughed, others looked away. No one stayed. As age came, the body stiffened. The chest still ached, but it no longer had the strength to fight for love. The only thing left was to sing, transform sorrow into song, longing into verses, failure into verses that no one paid for. Yet in the darkness, lying on the straw, you relived every sigh, every secret rendezvous, every stolen night, and for a moment, the pain made sense. In the Middle Ages, being romantic meant starving to death with your heart open. It meant walking paths where swords couldn't reach, but words cut deeper than any blade. Would you, stubborn man, be remembered? Probably not. Your name wouldn't become legend. Your poems would rot along with the parchment. But somehow, each verse of yours wove an invisible thread into the tapestry of the world. And even if no one knew, every "I love you" whispered in the darkness made the wall tremble, even if it was only inside his chest. Anyone looking from the outside would call it madness, epic stupidity. But there, lying in the straw, you knew love was the only way to stay alive in a world that wanted to bury everything sweet. Maybe one day someone would write a story about you. They would invent a name, give you more glory than you ever had. They would turn your tears into verse. And for a few coins, other dreamers would sit around the fire to hear your tragedy. And you, buried without a tombstone, without heirs, without cows to count, would laugh there in the ground, because deep down, only a foolish heart understands that dying of love is worth more than living without feeling anything. And so, between cold walls and marriage contracts, your epic stupidity blossomed. A handful of wilted flowers thrown into the mud, an out-of-tune lyre echoing in the night, an "I love you" lost in the wind, the one thing no one, not even the feudal lord, could take from you.